Hey everybody, I'm author K.R. Paul and I wrote the Pantheon series. Today we're going to talk about characters. Good, evil, harmful, or helpful. If you want to connect with your readers, you need good characters. So today we're going to talk about 4 things to consider. What makes them good? What is their purpose? What is their background? And let's talk about the devil in the details. First of all, what makes a character good? And when I say good, I don't mean like good guy. What I mean by this is a character that people love even when they hate to love them. So without diving into too many irrelevancies, once upon a time, I was a starving college kid and I worked as a professional wrestler's valet. Not like I drove his car around, like I was his ringside managers. The guys are called managers, the girls are called valets. I had to come up with a persona before we started each show. Yes, wrestling is a show. Sorry, it's not real. And I was completely lost for what to do. Who was this person that I was supposed to be portraying? And so the showrunner pulled me aside and goes, you can be a face, which is a good guy. You can be a heel, which is a bad guy. But for the love of God, don't be boring. And yes, that same applies for novels, fan fiction, RPG, story development, any kind of writing you want to do. Be good, be bad, but don't be boring. So let's talk about what makes that high quality character. A high quality character is going to be one that is distinct, compelling, complex, and with an understandable motivation, even when it's negative. So let's break that down just a little bit. Distinct. Your character should be discernible in a police lineup. If you did that police lineup, you should be able to point one to one and go, green eye's the color of money. That's obviously Gentleman Johnny Marcone from Jim Butcher's Dresden Files. Long brown hair in a braid and she's got a bow. Clearly that is Katniss Everdeen. She's got red gold hair and she's ripped. That's going to be Valerie Hall from the Pantheon series. And every single one of them needs their own voice. How they speak, how they act, how the character's behavior and body language should be unique with every single character. Compelling. Your reader should love your character, even when they hate them. They should root for your character, even when they know that the character's actions are bad, immoral, wrong. This is driven by the complexity of the character and the character's motivation. Complexity. Your characters need depth. They need a backstory that drives them. No adult or teen, if you write young adult fiction, magically appears on that earth. That's it. If you're a fantasy writer, maybe they do, but they still have a background. Every person has a life before the story starts. So write about that and tell me how that impacts them. Motivation. Last, and certainly not least, because it is probably the most important part of any character, what is their motivation? Why are they doing it? You cannot become your reader's favorite if they're evil with no motivation. Like, evil to be evil is dumb. Nobody wants to read that. Tell me why. It's got to be believable. It's got to be clear, and it's got to be understandable, even if you don't reveal that until the end. You have to have something that sparks empathy with your readers. Going back to Katniss Everdeen, she's distinct, she's compelling, but what's her motivation? When you look at her, even the author notes that she does come off as a bit of a sociopath. She doesn't like a lot of people. However, she has a distinct love for her younger sister. That is what most people are able to connect with, and that's where they find their empathy for this character. And her love for her sister is what motivates her throughout the entire series. Now, my other favorite is Killmonger from the Black Panther movie. He is a great example of a villain with villainous motivations, but even though he is violent and he's cruel and he's willing to kill people to get what he wants, when you actually hear him tell you what his plan is, you can sit back and say, I kind of get it. I don't agree with your methods, but I kind of get where you're going with this. So to recap, a good character needs to be distinct and compelling, which comes from complexity and a good motivation. When you have all of these things together, it doesn't matter whether you are writing fan fiction, a novel, novella, you are writing a character for an RPG campaign. When you have all of these things together, you have a character that people can root for. So how do you, as an author or a D&D player, RPG tabletop gamer who's building a character, how do you take these 4 elements and you put them together into one character to make them this amazing character? Well, it's 3 easy steps, super simple. I'm just kidding, none of this is simple. Okay, it's not a fast or simple process. However, if you do it right and you build them up in layers, then you can develop this character as well as an ensemble cast that your readers and your players are going to love. Step 1, what is your character's purpose? So you have to ask yourself as you're developing this character, what is the character's purpose in the story? Are they my protagonist? Are they my antagonist? Are they there as a background character? Those are okay too. Everybody needs a little background scenery. Do they fit one of the 4 character archetypes, right? Like, are they one of those? How do they advance the plot? If your character does not have a purpose, they do not have a place in your story and you need to cut them out. I'm sorry that this is like your auntie, your best friend, your whoever else that you want to write in here and you owed them a favor and you want to put them in the book. If they don't have a purpose, cut them out. When it comes to fleshing out your character, you're probably going to take the most amount of time with your protagonist and your antagonist, your good guy and your bad guy. But after that, you still have side characters that need to be fleshed out as well. And a lot of them, you can kind of shortcut some of the parts of this by looking at the archetype of a character and determining which one they fall under. Are they the lover? Are they the sage? Are they the wise one? And you'll see many character types like this across all of literature. It helps us in our mind cross-cut directly to the point of the character, and it gets more across without having to spend so much time and words explaining to somebody what somebody's character is. So for example, if you have read the Dresden Files, which I referenced earlier, you've seen the Michael Carpenter character. He is the archetype of the father figure. He fills that role throughout the series, and he's very well written and developed in that role. He provides wisdom, he provides kind of that sage look at what's going on, and he also provides a moral compass to the main character, Harry Dresden, who oftentimes is a more morally gray character. You sort of use Michael as your true north, as that father figure. Now, despite being an archetype, he's actually a very well-developed character with a fantastic backstory, and that's what keeps him from being a cliche. Nobody loves a character that's a cliche. In fact, he's actually so well developed that Jim Butcher has actually written him into several short stories of his own without the main character appearing, which I think is really the mark of a good, well-developed side character. Now, speaking of backgrounds, let's talk about your character's background. Where your character's purpose is their entry point into the story. This is what they do and why they're here. The character's background is where you start adding complexity, because the background will set the foundation for all of your motivations. Every action should have a reason behind it, even the small behaviors. Do you show your antagonist kicking a puppy, right? Like, is that a way to demonstrate how evil they are? Yeah, great, but I need you to give me the background that tells me why they kicked that puppy. Were they attacked by a dog in their childhood and now they're on a vengeance quest to destroy every dog they meet? You can avoid the cliche as long as you tell me what happened in the background to make them this way. Is your heroine stunningly beautiful? Great, neat, that's awesome. But now I need you to tell me about her time in high school and how she was the ugly duckling and she was so self-conscious that she taught herself how to do stage makeup for no reason other than she was self-conscious. So let's pull from another example. This time, so that I don't get sued, we're going to use an example from one of my own novels. In Pantheon, I initially described Valerie Hall, my protagonist, as overweight, shy with men, and happy to settle into the cheerful fat girl persona, even when it has negative impacts on her military career. This character description allows me as the author to show her growth throughout the series. She becomes strong-willed, fiery tempered. She is a passionate but loyal woman all the way to the end. It does serve to add complexity to the character because you see her go from the background and where she was at the beginning of the story through that catalyst event and then the change that occurs afterwards. It also will help describe why even once she becomes tall, slender, athletic, powerful, she still has her own emotional foibles and things that she becomes self-conscious about. And even those little bits of friction in the character make for great and compelling scenes. So how do I create a compelling protagonist who starts off as, admittedly, by all accounts, dumpy and kind of boring? Because the circumstances are what drive her to that change, that catalyst, and it's also now her motivation. She starts the story driven by grief. The loss of her fiance drove her into depression and depressive eating, and she finds that it's easier to live in that cheerful fat girl persona than go about trying to change anything. It's comfortable, it's easy to go with, it's safe. And so she lives in this wonderful world that is comfortable and safe to her, but she's not achieving the goals that she wants. And then the catalyst happens, and that's where you get to see having to break away from who she was into who she's becoming. And she finally becomes the woman that she wants to be while seeking vengeance and justice for what happened to her. So when you do meet her, you can look at her as a somewhat normal person who then has the worst day of her life, but she's able to achieve greatness. And so for the average reader, you have that one moment where you can look at the character and see a little bit of yourself in that character. That's where the reader starts connecting to the character. They start building empathy for the character, and then they're hooked. And now step 3, the devil in the details. The final element of character creation is the details. I talked about this as layering. This is where you start layering in those last little details. I don't need you to hit your reader with huge details. You don't have to tell me endlessly, like, what about that one tiny little fleck and their otherwise beautiful, fan fiction blue eyes, and how perfectly straight their nose is, and that they're tall, dark, and handsome. It's cliche. The brain has a beautiful ability that when you give it a small detail, it will actually start building some of that for you. Use that to your own advantage. I like to start with the smallest possible details, fill in just a little bit around it, and leave lots of blank space for my readers to fill in the rest. The hardest part of this is striking the balance between too much and too little. It's a rare author that can get away with too little. It is every author that cannot get away with too much. You have to give the person's overall basic look, just a little bit on the height. Are they taller than average? Are they shorter than average? Are they fat? Are they thin? Find a creative way to tell me that. But then I need you to tell me the details that talk about them as a person. I don't need you to tell me that your hard-boiled lady cop smells like cordite and gun oil. What I want you to tell me about is that one little callus on the back of her thumb that comes from shooting at the range so much. That's the detail that I, as the reader, want. It's small, but when you start thinking about it as the reader, you can build it up and up in your mind. You think about all that time she spends at the range. Tell me about your soft character who is embedded with hardened military types. And well, you've got these big, beefy, brawny military types. You've got the one adorable little thing in a cashmere sweater that just begs to have one calloused hand run over it. That's the little detail that starts sparking the rest. And now I don't have to tell you what the sweater looks like. I don't have to tell you anything else about them. You can already see the tension that builds between the characters. The last little detail that I like to put in is what I call my character's voice. It's the way in which my character will speak to themselves, to others, to an authority figure, to a subordinate. You need to be able to have them change that voice depending on who they're talking to. For example, in Pantheon, Valerie Hall initially starts off as a kind of lower ranking officer, so almost everyone she addresses very formally. A lot of sir and ma'am, very polite, very quiet. However, after her catalyst event, she herself becomes much more powerful and is entitled to a higher rank, and you will find that she starts engaging people on a more peer level, and so the voice and how the character speaks to others changes throughout the series. I also had one incredibly smart reader note that there is one time and one time only that she calls her father Daddy. In her moment of need, she breaks down and you see her come back to her younger self, and how she would have addressed him as a child comes out. But all the subsequent interactions after she's starting to heal again, she just refers to him as Dad. My other character is Martinez. He's in his early 40s and the most senior character in the group's elite military structure. As such, he gets the opportunity to speak with an authoritative voice when he's speaking to his coworkers. However, the reader should pick up early on that he has at least one coworker that he doesn't talk like that to. He speaks to her half in Spanish, half in English, to which she responds about the same way. And that is how you are supposed to realize that his relationship with Mandy is very different, that she is a part of the family and he speaks to her like a father figure. But he doesn't talk like that to anybody else. So again, tiny little details that just add characterization and color to every aspect of your book. So in conclusion, be good, be bad, but for the love of God, don't be boring. Make sure that your characters are distinct, they're compelling, they're complex, and they have a great motivation. That is the foundation for characters that your readers will love.